So when we eat these healing, nourishing foods, and we take away our ability to turn to food to numb out or to make us feel good or to regulate our emotions, we say, well, what now? How else am I going to feel good? How else am I going to de-stress? How else am I going to get joy? I've been using food to do that. Food has been my comfort. I do want to start out this video with a trigger warning. I do briefly discuss drug addiction and loss, death. So if those are topics that you are not comfortable with, then this might not be the video for you. This past weekend, my mom, Healthy Mummy, my sister-in-law, and myself went up to Vermont. I had never been to Vermont before, but we went to volunteer for a charity event. The event was hosted by the charity that my mom helped found and helps run, which is to support individuals whose children are struggling with addiction or who have lost their children to drug addiction. So the retreat was for parents who have unfortunately lost their children to drug addiction, and they were there for a healing weekend. So Healthy Mummy did her integrative energy therapy. My sister-in-law is a yoga teacher and she did healing restorative yoga, and then I put on a workshop called Healing Through Food. And so today I'm going to be sharing with you what I made for lunch for everybody so that we could heal through food, and also the workshop that I put on, I recorded, and I wanted to bring you along. Now, the group of men and women that I was speaking to did lose their child to drug addiction, and that has affected their relationship with food. You watching this video may have a different background or something that you've been through, or something, maybe it's not as intense as that, but it is chronic what is affecting your relationship with food. So one person's hurt is not bigger than your hurt or more excusable for their relationship with food. No matter what you've been through, what I'm going to be talking about today is going to be applicable to you if you find that outside factors, emotional reasons, stress, outside stressors in your life are affecting your relationship with food. So it may not be anything close to the struggles of the men and women that I'm speaking to in today's video, but you absolutely can listen and take from this video something that will help you with dealing with the life stressors that affect your relationship with food. Let's start out with me showing you what I made for lunch for everybody. So I decided that our healing lunch was going to be tacos, because who doesn't love tacos? And if tacos can be the transportation to a healthier, healed, more fulfilling life, sign me up. I will take it. I started out by laying out these corn tortillas. You can buy any corn tortillas from the store. You just want to check the ingredients, and there shouldn't be any more ingredients than just corn, water, lime, salt. Sometimes there will be some other ones in there. You just want to make sure that there isn't any oil. Then I bought a bunch of these microwavable brown rice bags, and I just poured them into this bowl and then put a plate over it and put it into the microwave for about 5 or 6 minutes to heat it all up. You technically are supposed to cook these in the bag, but I would have been cooking bags of microwavable rice all day long, so I just poured them all into this microwave-safe bowl, put a plate over it, put it into the microwave, and that worked beautifully. Then I bought a bunch of canned black beans and just poured these into the strainer, rinsed them, put them into a bowl, and put those out. And the guests were so thrilled about black beans. They all were saying that they love black beans. And I said, well, great, then this will be great for our tacos. And then for veggies, I went with some shredded romaine. I just cut up hearts of romaine. I also got some shredded cabbage. Because we had so many people to serve, it would have been too much to try to water saute any peppers and onions, which is what I usually do when I make tacos, but this went beautifully. So I just had the lettuce and shredded cabbage, because you could buy them, bring them, put them into the fridge. You didn't have to worry about actually cooking anything. And then we had guac and salsa, and the guests could take their taco shells, add in the rice, the beans, the lettuce, the cabbage, the salsa, and the guac and assemble their tacos. By the way, if you don't know who I am and you're new here, hi, I'm Healthy Emmie. I'm a nutritionist and the creator of the Slim on Starch program, where you work with me as well as a mindset coach and a nutrition coach to lose weight on a plant-based diet. All right, are we ready to get started? Yes. All right, well, if you don't know, my name is Emmie, Healthy Emmie, Emily M. You can call me anything. You can call me gorgeous if that's easiest. I'll respond to that. I am a nutritionist and I'm going to be talking about healing through food. And I know that sounds very elusive and kind of hippy-dippy, healing through food, and kind of like I'm going to give you some green juices and some elixirs, but I don't do that. I don't do any of that crazy stuff. This is actually pretty simple. When I talk about healing through food, I'm not just going to talk about the food that's on our plate, but on the back of the worksheet you'll see we'll talk about the concept of primary foods. So we're going to talk about real food that goes on your plate and how you can nourish and heal through that, but also dig a little bit deeper and talk about how we can nourish our souls and our hearts and find more outside of what's just on our plate. But let's start with the basic stuff. Let's start with the actual food, because that's easy. That's something we can all wrap our minds around. So on the front of the worksheet, we're going to talk about secondary foods. So secondary foods, those are the foods that go on our plate. When I build a plate, I split it up into the different categories that you see here. The first category that you see is starch. Whenever we make a meal, we want to make sure that starch is the main component of the meal. And I know that might sound crazy because we hear that starches and carbs, those are things that we should stay away from. But actually, the foods that I've listed here, they're nourishing foods. They are foods that will keep you full. They are the foods that are really the key to life. They're cheap, they're accessible, and they're what we should build our plate off of. So I would take a moment and look through the foods that I've listed here and just circle any of the foods that you enjoy, any of the ones that stick out to you.
I know. I get circles all around.
So as you'll see with the lunch that I've prepared for us today, I have selected both rice and corn tortillas as my starch because we're going to be making tacos. Whenever you make a meal that you want to heal you and nourish you, the first thing you want to decide on is, what is my starch going to be? You can choose multiple starches. Anything from this list will do. All you want to make sure is that you prepare it without any oil and without any animal products, so no butter or lard or ghee. So if you want to write that in as a little note. But any of these can be the base of your meal.
So no butter, no oil, and no lard?
No animal products, correct. Now, the next category that you want to focus on when you're creating a meal for yourself that you want to heal you and nourish you is vegetables. Now, this is not an exhaustive list. This is just what was on the top of my head when I typed this up. You can choose any vegetables you enjoy, but go ahead and circle the ones that stick out to you. Do I have a feeling that you might not have as many circles for this one as you did the first category? All right.
Yeah, I do too. No, I think everything on the list is good for me.
Vegetable question.
Of course.
Does it matter, or is there a preferred way to consume them, being either raw or cooked?
That's a good question. So when we consume these, from a nutritional standpoint, technically raw is going to preserve most of the micronutrients, but something that I often say is we shouldn't major in minor things. So yes, when you cook vegetables, you do lose a little bit of the micronutrients, but people aren't sick or having weight issues or dealing with health ailments because they're cooking their vegetables instead of eating them raw. I don't really love raw vegetables. You probably won't catch me eating any raw vegetables. I almost always cook them, which is a beautiful segue into my next point about how to cook these. So you'll remember with category 1, I said no oil, no butter, no animal products. And everybody loves vegetables when they're doused in oil and you sprinkle cheese on top, but we're not going to do that if we're building a healing, nourishing meal. So how do we cook these without butter and oil and all of that? We can steam, we can water saute, which is just whatever you would do with oil. Just have some water next to a nonstick pan and keep adding water and moving the vegetables around and it will cook. You can get parchment paper and you can roast these in the oven. You can boil them. You can also buy a little spray bottle on Amazon and you can spray your veggies with veggie broth or balsamic vinegar or any type of vinegar, and you can put them into the air fryer or put them into the oven and they can roast that way.
So it's a spray what?
You can buy a spray bottle on Amazon.
Yeah.
And fill it with balsamic vinegar or veggie broth. Or actually you can take a jar of pickles and you can pour the pickle juice into the spray bottle and spray that on the veggies. Yep. And any spices you enjoy as well. The next category is fruit. Who doesn't love fruit? This one is super simple. I think that fruit is nature's fast food. It's the easiest thing to grab on the go. I often get asked, what can I grab when I'm going out of the house? We don't want to grab highly processed protein bars or snacks or anything that has a package with ingredients lists. Fruit is so easy. It's packaged up for you. Oranges, bananas, they have the protective outside so you don't have to wash them if you take them on the go. So I love fruit as a snack on the go. So go ahead and circle the fruits that you enjoy. All right, the next category is legumes. So I do eat a plant-based diet. I do promote a plant-based diet, which means I don't consume any animal products. I don't have any meat or cheese or eggs or anything along those lines. So where do I get my protein? Legumes. Legumes are beans, peas, and lentils, tofu, tempeh, edamame. The legume that I selected for today's tacos is black beans. Go ahead and select whatever legumes jump out to you. Yeah, so we've heard of tofu, right? Tempeh is like the cousin of tofu. So tofu comes from soybeans. Tempeh also comes from soybeans. It's sprouted soybeans. You've probably heard of sprouted breads before. It's the same type of thing, the same process, but they are sprouting the soybeans. And then the last category is healthy fats and condiments. So we do need to get a source of healthy fat. There is such thing as healthy fats. We love guacamole, we love hummus, we love tahini, we love peanut butter. These are all fantastic. We do want to make sure that we keep them as condiments and, we're not putting dollops and dollops of these healthy fats on because they are richer, higher in calories, higher in fat, but we do need a little bit of them. So today I selected guacamole to go on our tacos. And then also to make this meal taste good, you need to add some condiments. You can really add any condiments that you want so long as there isn't any oil in them. And I've listed a bunch of foods here that don't have any oil added. Oil is quite inflammatory. It's the most calorically dense food product on the planet. It's 4,000 calories per pound, which is in comparison to something like lettuce, which is 100 calories per pound. So even if you add just a little bit, you've added a ton of extra fat and calories and inflammation. So select anything here that jumps out to you.
So I thought the Mediterranean diet was like olive oil.
That's a good question. So the Mediterranean diet, the reason why people that come from the Mediterranean region have had such success eating the Mediterranean diet is not because of the oil, it's because of all the fruits and the vegetables. They were eating pretty much everything on this list, a plant-based diet. They added in a little bit of oil, but what happens is people fixate on the oil and they say, oh, it's the oil that did it, when really it was the abundance of fruits and vegetables that made it so successful for them. So now we have a bunch of circles all over our worksheet, which means when we go to the grocery store, if we pick up everything that we've circled, we bring it home, we look at this worksheet, and if we're going to build a healing, nourishing meal for ourselves, we choose one or two from each category, we build a bowl, throw our condiments on top, and we have a very simple meal for us. So that's the secondary food. That's the easy part. The reason why I wanted to take care of the secondary food, the food that goes on your plate before we flip over to the back and we talk about primary foods, is because I often find that we use food for reasons outside of physical nourishment. Food can make us feel good, it can make us numb out, it can distract us, it can de-stress us. And when we do that, we numb ourselves. And something that I've learned from Brene Brown, I'm sure many of you are familiar with her, is that we cannot selectively numb. So if we turn to food to help us numb out or to distract ourselves or to try to feel something that we're missing in another part of our lives, we'll numb out the feeling of pain, for example. And when we numb out the feeling of pain, we also numb out the feeling of joy. So if we're turning to these ultra-processed foods and these high-calorie, euphoric foods that make us feel so good, and that's what we rely on and that's what we focus on, then we aren't able to feel joy from the simpler pleasures in life and our hobbies and our relationships and spirituality and our interests, because the relationship with food has become so hyper-stimulating and our primary relationship. A lot of the clients that I work with, their primary relationship is food, and they've lost joy in other parts of their lives due to emotional eating and turning to food in order to regulate emotions. So when we eat these healing, nourishing foods, and we take away our ability to turn to food to numb out or to make us feel good or to regulate our emotions, we say, well, what now? How else am I going to feel good? How else am I going to de-stress? How else am I going to get joy? I've been using food to do that. Food has been my comfort. And if you turn over to the back of the page, we'll get an answer to that. So I'm going to introduce you to a concept called primary foods. Primary foods are not the foods that go on our plate. They're the activities, the relationships, the hobbies that nourish our soul. And it's so important that we focus on primary foods, because if we don't, then we turn to secondary food, cookies, cakes, pastries, pizza, in order to make us feel things that we should be getting from things outside of what's on our plate. So often when I work with my clients that have struggled with their relationship with food for a very long time, and I ask them, what are your hobbies? What are your interests? What do you like to do? They draw blanks because food has been the focus for them so long. That's been their primary relationship. I know that for the people here, food could be something that you've relied on in times of pain or in times of stress, and it's been something that's comforted you and you could always turn to. It was always there for you. And so through this activity, I want to help you discover the primary foods outside of what goes on your plate that can bring you those same feelings. So, easy question that you can start out with. You don't have to share these. You can just write them down. The first question is, because we're going to start to brainstorm what your primary foods are. Mm-hmm. When you were a kid, how did you like to spend your time? Go ahead and write down your answer. I know that for me, I loved to play soccer. So something I still do as an adult is I'm in a soccer league, because I think it's important to connect with the version of yourself that when you had this childlike wonder and you hadn't seen all of the parts of life that were difficult, what did you really enjoy, and how can we step back into that place and sort of nurture our inner child? So looking at what you wrote down, think about, how can I bring this into my adult life? If it was, I liked to go swing on the swings, is there a park nearby your house that you can go swing on the swings on? Or if you liked to color, could you get an adult coloring book? So something for you to think about in terms of, how can I take what I liked to do when I was a child and bring it into my adult life so that I can get that childlike sense of peace in my days. The next question is, if given a free afternoon, how would you like to spend it?
And that's now, not when I was a kid.
You can do whichever one calls to you, but I was thinking more now, but if nothing comes up, then think about when you were a kid. So I want you to look at what you wrote for question 2 and consider, did I put something that was a chore that I just need to check off my list, or did I put something that really brings me joy and that I love to do? The next question is, what is a skill I've always wanted to learn how to do? And if you're not sure, think about people that you know that have really cool things that they do and say, I think I would want to try that. I can tell you that for me personally, one of my primary foods that I am constantly working on is speaking Spanish. So perhaps learning another language. So feel free to go through the rest of these questions. I'll give you some time and then we can chat. So primary foods are the relationships, the pastimes, the hobbies, spirituality, the interests that you have that nourish your soul. And if I were to ask you that 15 minutes ago, what are your primary foods? You'd say, what the heck are you? Pasta, potatoes, girl. But now we know that we have a bunch of activities down here. We have relationships, we have hobbies, we have skills that we want to learn. So now we know what our primary foods are. We know what they are. How are we going to implement them? Because knowing them is one thing, making them part of our daily life is another. So look at what you've written down here. Don't really look at the questions too much. Just look at your responses and try to pull out the activities, pull out the relationships, pull out the skills that you want to learn, and start by asking yourself, where can I implement these on a daily basis? And if you can just choose one, that's okay. Under your daily primary foods, write out what a daily primary food for you might be. One for me is running. Meditation is a daily primary food of mine. There are so many lefties in this group. I see 4.
Nice.
We're all in our right mind.
That's cool. And Kathy, who else?
So when we talk about healing through food, we're not just talking about what we're going to put on our plates. We have that taken care of. That's on the front of the paper. So now you know what to buy at the grocery store. You know how to build your plate. You have your different categories. But we also want to consider, how am I going to build these primary foods into my day and my month and my year, so that not just my physical body is taken care of, but my heart and my soul are nourished as well.
You know, the interesting thing is, with all of us, what happens when you lose someone you love?
Yeah.
They come to your
With
house
food.
full of food, comfort food, lasagna, soups, you know. And it does help nourish us and emotionally somehow.
Yeah.
The awareness of that is big, is noticing that we're using food for something outside of physical nourishment and asking ourselves, where else can I get that? So if it's too overwhelming to think about replacing it and, you know, oh, well, I don't want to give up turning to food. I'm not asking you to do that. What I'm asking is to start to bring in things that nourish you outside of food. So that we can form that neural pathway as well of looking for comfort in other things instead of always wanting to go to food.
You have to try it.
Yes, Cheryl?
So over time, if you adapt this eating habit, like, will your cravings for sugar items or pizza, like the things that we go to now, like that little bar over there,
I just wasn't looking over there.
and the pizza we had for dinner last
Don't look in our fridge.
does your body start to crave that less?
That's a really good question. So there's something called neuroadaptation and the extinction curve. And we find that after 21 to 30 days of exclusively eating whole plant foods, neuroadaptation has occurred, so you don't crave those foods anymore. The first few days, you experience a peak in cravings, and you want everything a million times more.
It's like quitting cigarettes.
Yes.
But if you allow enough time, brain changes do occur. I also say what you eat today, you crave tomorrow. So if you eat one thing today and you eat the same thing tomorrow and the same thing tomorrow, your body will start to ask for that. Our gut bacteria also ties into this. We have 100 trillion bacteria in our gut. So the bacteria in our gut outnumbers us 100 trillion to 1, which means it's pretty important. And that determines what we crave. It determines how we digest food. And the bacteria that lives in our gut eats what we eat. So if we eat eggs, then we have bacteria in our gut that eats eggs. If we eat a lot of potatoes, which is what I eat a lot of, then I have a lot of bacteria in my gut that eats potatoes. So if you stop eating the foods like the cookies, cakes, pastries, pizza, all that bacteria dies out, so you don't get those cravings anymore, and you cultivate a gut microbiome that will want the foods that you'll be eating today. It's amazing if you give it a chance. The first few days are hard, but you get through it, and then you start to crave those foods.
What about supplements?
So
Recommend, or do you take supplements to add to the nourishment?
I do take one supplement. It's a vitamin B12. You can't get it on a vegan diet. You can only, the reason why is because it's in the dirt. And so the animals eat the dirt, so that's why meat has B12, because they're eating the dirt, but we don't eat dirt, so we don't get B12. But other than that, I don't supplement anything. I don't recommend blind supplementation, which would be supplementing without knowing that you have a known deficiency. If you know that you have deficiency in something, then I find it appropriate, but I wouldn't recommend blindly supplementing, because then you're throwing off your levels.
And then I have a question. So it's so confusing because there's so many, and I'm not calling this a diet. This is like a health, a lifestyle. But like some people say you shouldn't eat fruits because they have sugar in them. And you would think that fruits are so healthy for you, but we were saying no, on certain diets you can't eat fruit.
Yeah.
And then it's so
I think that's the
confusing. It's just so confusing.
You know what we've become so confused because of all these diets that have come up, and let's do the keto diet, and let's do this diet, and let's do that diet. And we said if your grandparents don't recognize it, then you shouldn't eat it. And that was like the basic premise of it. And also we don't know what to eat anymore. If you're looking at a package of something and it has more than like 4 ingredients, probably shouldn't eat it.
Yeah, there's a quote that I love. It's real food doesn't have ingredients, real food is ingredients. So if you look at all the foods that are on this list, they're all whole real foods. The reason why people say the sugar thing is there's confusion between glucose, which is the body's preferred source of fuel. Anything that ends in ose is sugar. Glucose is the body's preferred source of fuel. Every single one of the hundreds of trillions of cells in our body runs on glucose. This is why when you do low carb diets, you can't function because you're not getting any glucose and you pass out. We have to have ose, glucose, sugar, carbs in order to run. It would be like if you had a car and you didn't put gas in it, it wouldn't work. You couldn't put water in instead, which is what you're doing on a low carb diet. Do not recommend low carb diets. We're confusing the sugar that comes in fruit with processed white table sugar. And those are two totally separate things. And when it comes to blood sugar, if you're pre-diabetic or somebody has diabetes, it's not the sugar in fruit that is going to cause an issue, because the fruit has fiber, which will blunt the insulin response. But candy, processed white table sugar, there's no fiber in there, so it'll spike your insulin through the roof. So if it's a whole natural food, then I always give it 2 thumbs up. And like I said at the beginning of this talk, I really keep things very simple, just eating whole natural foods and no pills or potions or smoothies or juices or anything crazy like that.
The book that you had mentioned before, I didn't write it down.
I didn't mention a book.
Somebody mentioned it.
But if you want to, I have a great book if you want to read it.
What is it?
It's called The Starch Solution.
You mentioned smoothies. Why not smoothies if they're homemade?
Yeah, if you are looking, they're not bad for you by any means. For my clients, I coach weight loss clients, so they're looking to lose weight. And in order to feel satisfied, we have to open and close our jaw a certain amount of times every day. So if you suck down a smoothie, you're not opening and closing your jaw, you're not chewing. So that's why you can suck down a smoothie and you're like, okay, where's my breakfast? I'm still hungry. And satiety, satisfaction is a really important part to long-term sustainable weight loss. So that's why I recommend eating versus drinking.
Justice.
That's very
Thank you.
interesting.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And where do we substitute our wine?
That's my big downfall. Lots of sugars, grapes won't do it. No. They are grapes.
The grapes will work. Go straight to the source. I can tell you something very interesting about alcohol is our fat cells are, so let's say this is a fat cell. Our fat cells are filled with toxins. So this is the toxin, this is the fat cell. The fat cell just sits the toxin just sits in the fat cell like this. So when you stop consuming alcohol and the toxin leaves the fat cell deflates. And that's why when people stop drinking, they lose weight because all their fat cells deflate.
So,
Where do you see us next
then what?
Don't be so proud.
Should we do before pictures now?
But now I'm sort of like feeling guilty.
Well, food is not moral. I tell people there's jails near my house and nobody's in there for eating pizza. It's not illegal. It's not a crime. I have my clients take photos of what they're eating and I see photos of everything so that they can take a moment and pause and they say, do I want to send this to my nutritionist? So adding in the intention, and a good mantra is, if hunger is not the problem, food is not the solution, and whatever the problem is, the answer is not in the fridge.
Some people say when you think you're hungry, you might be thirsty.
Mm-hmm.
So think about grabbing some water
Mm-hmm.
instead of just going for a snack. Do
Yeah.
you find that helps as well?
Yeah, there's a study done where they had people assess their thirst on a scale of 1 to 10, how thirsty are you? And they would monitor their hydration levels. And what we found is that humans are awful at monitoring our thirst levels. And so oftentimes, you're correct, Cheryl, we will think that we're hungry when truly we're dehydrated.
I think there's some statistic about the percent of Americans that are chronically dehydrated.
It's actually, so the number one reason of crabbiness in kids is because they don't have enough carbohydrates, they don't have enough glucose, and number 2 is that they're dehydrated.
Yeah.
And we think it's because they ate too much sugar.
Yes, exactly.
That's not right.
And how much water do you drink a day?
So you take your body weight. So who wants to tell me what they're? No, I'm just kidding. So you take your body weight and you divide it in half. So if I weighed 200 pounds, I would want to drink 100 ounces. If I weighed 150 pounds, I would want to drink 75 ounces. So coffee does dehydrate you. So you'll want to make sure you drink extra if you do drink coffee. In terms of coffee and health, if you have high cholesterol, you want to lay off the coffee, even if it's decaf, that will increase your cholesterol. In terms of when my weight loss clients ask me about coffee, usually I'm fine and they can get away with it just fine. The only thing that I would warn you about with coffee and weight loss is that coffee will mask our hunger signals, because you're riding the caffeine high. So for a lot of people, coffee is their breakfast, and they'll drink coffee in the morning. They say, oh, I'm not that hungry. And then the caffeine... Hi, that's okay.
Wait, can you say that one more time?
Sure. Okay, so coffee and weight loss, my question when my clients ask about that. Coffee is something that will give you a caffeine high, which means that you'll wake up in the morning, you'll drink the caffeine, and whatever hunger signals your body's trying to send you, you won't be able to detect because you're riding the caffeine high. And you're like, oh, I have energy, I don't need to eat, I'm not hungry, because you're drinking coffee. It's the caffeine that's masking your hunger. So what happens is later in the day, the caffeine wears off, and all of that hunger that was boiling up underneath the surface comes out to play, and that's why at 3 or 4 o'clock, that's when it all goes downhill for most people, right? They're like, that's when I get snacky, I'm reaching for everything, and it's usually coffee drinkers that say that. So coffee in and of itself doesn't have any adverse effects metabolically or for weight loss or anything along those lines, except for the caffeine. I mean, the cholesterol that I was talking about. But from a weight loss standpoint, it does muck up your hunger fullness cues a bit, which then leads to overeating.
So you need to be aware of that. when you
Right.
drink.
I personally don't. I don't do caffeine.
But
I
we
will
do.
stare at the ceiling if I drink caffeine.
I know, we had to the ride here, we couldn't get to the ride.
We didn't get that away right now.
But actually, I got half decaf though.
All right.
Weaning herself off.
Yeah, but basically,
And
when
that's
you said
soy
the
milk,
decaf is like basically the same as caffeine when it comes to cholesterol. and
Cholesterol,
stuff.
yes. There are diterpenes in coffee that will raise your cholesterol, and it's also present in decaf. So my mom has high cholesterol, and we were determined to get it down, so she had to mix the coffee, and she really only has it on special occasions now. So if you have high cholesterol, you want to get rid of the coffee.
Could you
I'm sorry.
substitute tea for the coffee then?
Absolutely.
Oh.
Yes.
Tea, regular tea.
Yep, there's a great brand called Dandy Blend and Tea Chino if you're looking for a tea that tastes just like coffee. Dandy Blend.
Tea has caffeine,
No,
doesn't it?
one kiss.
It does have a little bit of
But not
caffeine.
as much.
Correct.
Dandy
It's
and
called
tea
Dandy Blend. Absolutely. And then Tea Chino's TEECINO.
Could you repeat it? Okay.
Sure, Dandy Blend and then Tea Chino. TEECINO.
Those are Whole Foods?
These are teas.
Or,
They're online. You can get them on Amazon.
oh, okay.
Nice.
Would you recommend a non-dairy creamer that really tastes?
Yeah, I think are you using dairy creamer at the moment?
Yeah.
Then I would start by buying whatever the traditional, whether it's Silk or whether it's Eden soy, so long as it's non-dairy, get started there and then start just monitoring how much of it you're using. Because I have clients who, if they're eating all the things that you circled on the front of this, and then they're having a little splash of non-dairy creamer, they do beautifully, because the little splash of non-dairy creamer is such a small amount. So I would definitely get rid of the dairy and substitute it for non-dairy, anyone that you can find at the store, but then focus more so on making sure that your foods are all whole foods.
A lot of butter and a lot of oil.
I love
Candy.
butter.
Yeah, we all do.
Half and
So
half.
milk too?
Yeah,
That's hard.
no animal products. If you guys want a great documentary, it's on YouTube for free. You don't even have to have a Netflix subscription. It's called Forks Over Knives, and it's a really life-changing documentary. I highly recommend it.
Yeah.
Forks over knives?
Forks Over Knives. Forks Over Knives on YouTube, I cannot recommend enough. Also on YouTube, the Healthy Emmie channel, if you want to check her out.
You don't need it.
I know.
You haven't tried Emmie's.
I haven't.
It's in the fridge.
Oh.
It's to die for. I'm sorry. I am the advocate for his hummus. I'm
Don't put oil.
gonna put it down on one of my lists
Oh, you
here.
don't add oil to it?
No.
You're my hero.
No.
I love it. You're right. There is no
The
need for
tahini is
it.
so low that it's still oily.
Yes.
The tahini is oily.
Yeah,
below.
Yes. Who
Thank
wants to
you.
eat? My pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been eye-opening.
Oh, good. I'm glad. So if you enjoyed this video and you're thinking, I think I want to heal my relationship through food, then I would definitely suggest that you reach out to work with me and my team by clicking the link in the down bar or just going to healthyemmie.org. I love you, honeys, and I'll see you in my next one.